Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at starting magic spells for casters in AD&D. So the four caster class are Cleric, Druid, Magic User, and Illusionist. I'm going to take a look at some of the best spells to start them out with at first level. I'm not going to go through every single spell, I'm just going to hit the high notes of each of the spell lists. We're going to be using the spell list out of Unearthed Arcana, because this is the most complete spell list for AD&D. And it has the spells that are available in the Player's Handbook and Unearthed Arcana. And this by no means exhaustive. There are plenty of other spells. Encyclopedia, or the Wizard's Compendium, Spell Compendium, has plenty of spells that are available that would be low level, but that's something to customize. Today is just going to be about a generalized start for a character. Also want to remind you, I'm still doing a drive to subscribe to the channel. Gotten great response so far. I want to thank everybody that subscribed and helped me get to the point I am. I'm still pushing for that 1,000 plus subscribers. So if we keep things going, it's been great. I appreciate all the help. I appreciate everybody making the effort. I've also got a Patreon going, and I've recently announced that there are going to be rewards for Patreon. One of which is going to be a serialized dungeon written by me, and going to include a lot of stuff that I've touched on in some of these earlier videos on how to start up your AD&D campaign, as well as a couple of the monsters from my last video, things like that. I've been writing my own campaigns for over 40 years. I've never tried to actually write one for another person's consumption, so this will be a beginning experience for both of us, but I think I have a fair idea how to patch it in. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to be looking for feedback on that as well. So again, the subscriptions and the Patreon are both there. If you can help the channel grow, I'd appreciate it. But back to the business at hand today, which is going to be starting spells for the casting classes. When starting out picking spells for your brand new AD&D character, a good place to go, if you have access to them, are these player character record sheets, specifically the Spellminders. I found these very useful over the years. They list all the spells by level from Unearthed Arcana and Player's Handbook. We have the Magic User, we have the Cleric, we have the Illusionist, and we have the Druid. This one also was published around the time of Oriental Adventures coming out in '85, so we also have access to the Shugenja spells, the Wujen spells. I'm not going to be discussing those today. I'm going to stay to the basic spellcasting classes from AD&D. Interestingly, the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master Guide, has, on page 39, has a list of starting spells for your Magic User. I'm going to start with that just because I thought this was kind of interesting. I've used this many times over the years. As of the publishing of Unearthed Arcana, it's no longer current, but it was a great handy thing to have. I've toyed with making up a similar list like this to include the Unearthed Arcana spells. I've just never gotten around to it. But basically it had the spells broken down: 9 offensive, 9 defensive, and 9 miscellaneous. And the idea was that the Magic User would start with something between 4 and 6 spells. And one of them, of course, would be Read Magic. And then we go on from there as far as maybe they'd roll, twice in the offensive, twice on defensive, and twice on miscellaneous. Maybe a total of starting of 7 spells. I have no problem with that, by the way. I really don't care if a Magic User has access to spells. The important limiter there is, even in our game with a 14 intelligence or greater, he'd only have 3 spell slots to choose from. So I really don't mind if he has a bit of a variety to choose from as far as the actual spells themselves. So that's all I wanted to show in the Dungeon Master Guide. Now we're going to take a look at Unearthed Arcana, and specifically we're going to look at the spell lists, and we're going to just kind of go down here a little bit and take a look at which ones are really good and which ones maybe not so good. So I've zoomed in a little bit there so you can read it a little bit better. So our first couple of spells, now the way you could do it with this table, well, the Clerics and the Druids, of course, get to pick whatever they want. So if a Cleric, is coming up and he's not sure what he wants, well, then he can go ahead and he can pick whatever he wants, and whatever his guide grants him is what he gets. Same with the Druid. So the first one comes up as Bless. That's not a bad spell. It adds some bonuses in combat. Ceremony and Combine are of limited use. Command, however, is a really good one. Command gives you the ability, if the creature's 6 hit dice or less, they get no saving throw, and you get to command them to do one thing. Create water, Cure Light Wounds, of course. That's a must. Almost every cleric I've ever DM'd has taken Cure Light Wounds at least once. I actually had a cleric played by my son Adam a few years ago, where he decided this guy was just going to be basically a battle cleric. So he took 3 Cure Light Wounds as his starting spells, and then jumped into combat every chance he had. So that's kind of an interesting take on the cleric. He broadened it when the cleric went up in levels, but it was a pretty interesting start. Detect Evil, limited utility at low levels. Detect Magic, some utility at low levels. Endure Heat and Cold, can have potential. Light, invisibility to undead, some potential. Light is a great one. You can cast that to light up a room, or you can cast it on an opponent's eyes. If they fail the saving throw, they're blind. Magic Stone, I don't think I've ever seen used. Penetrate Disguise, again, not one I'd pick a lot. Protection from Evil is actually a pretty good one, but you have to remember that's got to be really bad evil. It can't just be your garden variety of evil. And Remove Fear, Resist Cold, and Sanctuary. So pretty much the highlights here are going to be Command, Cure Light Wounds, and Light. For my money, those would be the 3 that I would really look at. Going over to the Druid side, the nature side of things. Change the angle a little bit of the camera. Going a little tighter if I can. There we are. I think that'll be a little easier to read. Okay, so we're starting out Animal Friendship. That can actually be a pretty useful Druid spell. You encounter that bear in the woods, and you can go ahead and cast the Animal Friendship, and maybe he'll accompany you. He won't be charmed to you by any means, but he might accompany you. Ceremony, I've never seen used. Detect Balance can be good. Again, that's more of a higher level thing. Detect Magic, always useful. Detect Poison can be good. Detect Snares and Pits can actually be very good. I actually like that one for low level. Entangle, that's it. That's the money right there. Entangle's really good because you have the opportunity when you're outdoors, of course, you just cast it and the tree branches come down and the grasses come up and they entangle your opponent. It's a large area that it's covered, and saving throw still slows them down tremendously. And years ago in a dungeon, I described the dungeon as being really old, and a lot of roots had penetrated through the walls and the ceiling, and there was a druid inside, and the druid picked up on that description after a few rooms, and one of the encounters, he cast Entangle. The roots stretched out and grabbed the opposition, and I had put them in there with the idea that if he recognized it, I would allow Entangle to work indoors. He recognized it, it worked beautifully. So there's a way you can use Entangle indoors. Don't beat them over the head with the fact that there are roots sticking out, but just kind of describe it passively. Fairy Fire, also a very good one. You give a bonus to hit in combat for everybody, and you can outline multiple targets that are near each other. So you've got those couple of orcs standing shoulder to shoulder. You hit the Entangle, you can get a couple of them. In the Fairy Fire, everybody gets bonuses to hit. Invisibility to animals, again, some use, I'm not really sure. Locate animals can be pretty good. You need to find out where there are some wild pigs, because, druids got to eat. Pass Without Trace I've always liked. The druid can pass anywhere and doesn't leave any trace behind of where he's been. That's pretty neat. Precipitation, it's okay. Predict Weather, also kind of okay. Purify Water, Shillelagh, and Speak with Animals. Speak with Animals can be good, especially in conjunction with Animal Friendship or Locate Animals. So it depends on if you're going, very animal heavy. Those might be good spells to just go ahead and grab for your low-level druid. Keep in mind, low-level druids also are pretty good combat units. They do decent damage. They have a good combat table. Their armor class usually isn't the greatest. Usually somewhere, with leather and a shield is going to give them a 7, and then if they've got any kind of dex bonus. So druids are kind of, if they're outdoors, they're kind of in their element, literally. If they're indoors, they can be a little at sea. So the DM's got to be a little patient and allow the druid to actually do something. Magic user spells. Let's face it, most of us will start out with some kind of magic user at some point. Much more likely to play a magic user than the druid anyway. So you're going to start out, and they have 40 first level spells to choose from, the longest list of any of the levels of any of the spellcasting classes. And with good reason. I like MUs. So Affect Normal Fires can be okay. Alarm also has its use. Armor in our game is very valuable because it gives you phantom hit points equal to 8 plus 1 phantom hit point per level. So a first level magic user casting armor would have 9 phantom hit points plus the +1 to armor class and +1 to saving throw. Armor's an auto include with us. Burning Hands. I love this spell. I don't like that at first level you only do 1 point of damage. Not really sure how good it is. Charm Person, almost an auto include. That's a very important spell to have. Just got to remember that to limit as the GM, you have to remember what the definition of person is and go accordingly. Comprehend Languages can be a good one to take. Dancing Lights, I don't know that I've ever seen used. It's possible. Detect Magic, always good. Enlarge. That's one that I think sometimes gets overlooked. Enlarge is also reversible. You can take Diminish as the reverse of Enlarge. And but Enlarge, if you have people hiding behind a barricade, and the barricade is an overturned table, you can enlarge the barricade or diminish the barricade, depending on which version of the spell you took. And remember, if you took Enlarge, you cast Enlarge. You can't just automatically reverse the spell. That actually was a point of some confusion for us early in D&D. So there are 2 separate spells that must be cast or memorized separately. Erase, again, I've seen it used once or twice. Featherfall can be good. It's the quickest casting time. I like Featherfall. As a GM, I have the creature subject to thermal updrafts, that kind of thing, prevailing winds, because they are light as a feather, as the spell says. So Featherfall, some use. Find Familiar, not at low level. Familiars get killed, you get creamed. I don't take them. Firewater can be okay. Friends can be all right. I've seen that used to good effect. Grease is an interesting one, because not only does it make the surface on which you're standing greasy, we allow it to be flammable. So you can actually grease up an area, and then as the creature's coming toward it, lob a torch in, and boom, you've got a little fire going. Hold Portal. Underestimated spell, in my opinion. There's a lot to be said for making the opponent have to chop through a door that you just charged through that was unlocked. So Hold Portal, I think, has some use. Identify, very useful spell. Usually not at this level. You want to be higher level before you're playing around with Identify. Jump, good spell. I always like Jump. Light, again, you can use it, cast on the opponent's eyes. Magic Missile, kind of an auto-include for a brand new first-level magic user. I've seen a few MUs skip it, but it's not bad. Melt, don't know that I've ever seen. Mending, you see this at high level when people want to fix minor damage to things. Message, also a higher level one. Mount. Mount's underestimated as a lower level spell, especially if it's an outdoor campaign. Mount can be a real game changer for the MU. They summon up their mount and off they go. So if they have the misfortune of getting a horse killed, they still have the means to get out of the area. Nystul's Magic Aura, I've seen cast a few times, never at first level. It can be interesting. Precipitation of limited use. Protection from evil at this level, limited use. Push. The foot pounds you generate at this level aren't that great, so that's a better spell taken at higher level. I do take Push when I'm higher level. Read Magic, of course, that's an auto-include. Run. Good spell. I see what they were going for, where if you didn't have a mount, you could run and you'd be fast, but I don't know. Shield, I've seen taken many times at lower level. It has some good use. Shocking Grasp. That's another one that I really wish the damage output was a little higher, and the MU's got to roll a hit. So that's why I'd like the higher damage output, because the MU has to actually stand in melee and roll a hit to touch with that. Sleep, auto-include. And you get 4 to 16 first hit dice creatures. Why not? Spider Climb. I've seen that taken a lot. We are easier on the rules, by the way, about stuff sticking to fingers, because the spell as written says that anything very lightweight, like a piece of paper, would stick as if you have flypaper on your hands. Well, then the spell's kind of useless. So we're pretty free with that. I won't let anybody rummage through their pack once they've cast Spider Climb, but I'm not going to be a real ticky-tack about chunks of the wall, coming off on their fingertips and negating the spell. Taunt, I've seen used a few times, actually, and that's actually had some pretty good effect. Tensor's Floating Disc. This is one I think our group undervalues. I think there's a lot to be said about Tensor's Floating Disc. It allows you to carry treasure and such out of the dungeon. I think it's got some potential. It's not used much. Unseen Servant, again, that's another one we see at higher level. And again, when you've permanenced it on yourself. Ventriloquism, never really seen it used. Wizard Mark, never used. And Write, of course, to write down spells and such. Actually, I don't think you can write spells with that. I've never really seen that one used either. So, as you're seeing, there are a lot of spells on the list that, And And keep in mind, in our campaign with a 14 intelligence, the magic user would have 3 spell slots for his high intelligence, just as the cleric had it for his high wisdom. So he's casting 3 spells. The 3 I would pick in my campaign would be armor, casting it once the night before, probably a charm person, and then definitely a sleep spell. And I might trade the charm person for magic missile, but most likely I'm going to stay with the charm person. Charm person, you can charm the evil bad guy and he starts fighting for you. You don't need the magic missile. He's doing some damage for you. I've seen charm used to really good effect. And then we come to the last list, the Illusionists. Here they have 16 spells to choose from. Of course, the first one that they're going to have to take is Revolutionist Magic. So we have Audible Glamour. I've seen that used a lot. That just makes a noise in a remote area or can make noise for an illusion. That's pretty good. Change Self, very popular at our table. You can change your appearance. Chromatic Orb. Only really good offensive spell other than light on this list. Color Spray has some good effects, but not much. Dancing Lights, not sure I've ever seen it. Darkness can be good. In our game, too, we rule that, of course, everybody is blinded by the darkness. I've played in campaigns where the caster could see through the darkness. We don't play it that way. Detect Illusion, useful, but not much at this level. Same with Detect Invisibility. Gaze Reflection, hopefully you're not fighting monsters that have active gazes at this level. Hypnotism, it can be some use. You have to be kind of static, not moving to cast that one. Light, as I've already talked about, a good one. Phantasmal Force, that one's pretty good. You can create an illusion without sound of something in the area. I've seen that used to good effect, where a magic user has just basically cast a big fighter standing directly in front of him. And nobody saw the magic user because he was behind this huge burly fighter. So that was an interesting use of it. Phantom Armor is kind of the answer to the magic user's armor spell. Phantom Armor gives you AC 3 and gives you a phantom hit point, 1 per level. Pretty interesting. The Phantom Armor does not state that you don't get dexterity bonuses with it. So we do allow Phantom Armor to have dexterity bonuses. So with this first level spell and an 18 dexterity, you've got an illusionist walking around at -1. I realize that's really powerful, but I also realize that's a pretty rare combination. Illusionist Magic, I've already talked about. Spook, that's where you kind of summon up a deep down fear of something that you're facing. You cast it on one target. The target says, and runs away if they fail their saving throw. Wall of Fog, I've seen have good effect. Wall of Fog can be used to basically obscure something as they come through this little wall of fog. You guys are on the other side with your missile weapons or your melee weapons, and you can strike down your opponents. So that's my thoughts on the first level magic user, illusionist, cleric, and druid spells. I want to touch on cantrips. Dun, 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 dun. I have to honestly tell you, cantrips in the way they're written up are you take 4 cantrips for 1 spell slot here. You think 4 to 1, how can I lose? And then you read the cantrips. These are of strictly limited utility. I'm not a huge fan of cantrips. I've cast them as a player. I've included them as a DM. I've had players include them. I've never really found a ton of use for them. Cantrips are better if you're just doing some stuff out of the game where you want to use the clean to kind of clean yourself up a little bit before an important meeting, that kind of thing. I've never seen a ton of use for the cantrips. I think these were under examined before they're included in the rules. Again, part of the rush to publish, which this game suffered, which this book rather suffered from on Earth Arcana. They had to get it out to get some cash in, and I think cantrips are another area where that kind of comes out. And the same thing with illusion cantrips. First off, there's only 8 of them, so that's of strictly limited use to you as well. And none of these are really all that good. So of all of my mask is kind of interesting, haze is kind of interesting, but nothing great. They're not good in melee. You're not going to be able to really befuddle an opponent with a cantrip. But I don't think you're supposed to plan on that. I think they were just supposed to be just there. So that's really all I've got to say about brand new first level spells. Any comments you have? Maybe I'm 100% wrong and you never take a charm person. The monsters always seem to make their saving throw, so why bother? Go ahead and put them down. I'm always interested in opinions from people, polite criticisms always, and any suggestions, other sources you use for spells. Now, I've talked about my Earth's Epic Opus Omnibus, the and we have a lot of first level spells in there. I'll allow those if a player comes to me and says, hey, my brand new magic user, I'd like to use this spell out of that. I'll say, sure, no problem. Other than that, I will use those as spells that will be something I give out on scrolls or a found magic user spell book later on in the game. So I'm not going to include those here any more than I would from the Wizard's Encyclopedia, simply because those are things you can hand out as magic down the line. So that's all I have to say today on page 121. I want to thank you for watching, and remember the subscriptions, the Patreon. I appreciate it. That's all I've got to say today. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on page 121.